Thank you very much to Jeffrey Hoffman for giving us a good historical basis for looking at today's problems. I think it was very informative. A lot of us have lived in this area our whole lives, and we've heard some stories about plans that have been put forth in the past and never acted on, and now we see that those weren't just stories. So thank you very much. I just want to remind you all that you had the option of getting 3x5 cards when you came in that you can use to write down questions. So we have collected some of those already. If you have questions after the first panel or in response to the keynote presentation, you can start filling those cards out now, and we will collect them at the time of the stand-up break, which is between panels 1 and 2. We will then go through those questions, and whatever time we have left at the end after panel 2, we will ask the panel to address the questions that we select, depending on how much time we have. I think then we will just move on to begin our first panel. Our moderator for the first panel is Dr. Richard Pardee. He is a professor emeritus from the Environmental Science Department at William Patterson. And he will introduce our panelists for tonight.
The organizers of the conference have assembled this evening into essentially two panels of experts who provide some background information on flooding in the Passaic River. The first panel, which I'm moderating, will address planning and responding to disaster, and the second panel that will follow at 7:30 will address municipal and state planning and response. I'll give you the rules I'm going to follow. I will first briefly introduce the panelists and then ask them to briefly, 2 minutes each, explain their roles in flood response and planning. I will then ask a series of questions. The panelists are aware of the nature of these questions, or were aware of the nature of the questions beforehand, and that will frame the panel's discussion. The panel's response to each question will be limited to a total of about 9 to 10 minutes total, all right? The conference is very pressed for time, and we have planned to allow for at least 30 minutes at the end, 8:30, for the two panel discussions for input of questions, as the Dean DeYoung just told you. So I'm going to introduce the 5 panelists first. I'll just go down through them, and then I'm going to ask them to essentially explain quickly in 2 minutes what their roles are. John Dunham is a sergeant with the New Jersey State Police, Office of Emergency Management, Emergency Response Unit, North Region Unit. He has been a state trooper for 11 years with 6 years experience in emergency management. Bill McDonald is Federal Emergency Management Agency, Region 2 Mitigation Branch Director. Previously, he worked with the New Jersey Office of Emergency Management Recovery Bureau as Assistant Bureau Chief and is a retired Lieutenant New Jersey State Trooper. In 2001, he responded to the World Trade Center disaster and spent 3 months in the New York City 1PP. I have no idea what PP stands for, so I have to explain that. Command as the New Jersey Law Enforcement Office of Emergency Management Liaison. Robert Lyons is County Coordinator for the Passaic County Office of Emergency Management. He is also Director of the Passaic County Police Academy. He formerly held positions in the Passaic County Prosecutor's Office as a county investigator and supervisor of the Major Crimes Unit. Roy Massaros is a coastal hydraulic engineer with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He is a graduate of William Patterson University, where he is also taught as an adjunct professor. He is currently an adjunct professor at Stevens Institute in Hoboken, where he teaches graduate courses in water resources and hydraulics. He performs hydraulic and hydraulic modeling for flood risk management projects. David Rosenblatt is the administrator of Engineering and Construction, Natural Historic Resources, New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Rosenblatt manages the development, construction, and management of all coastal storm damage reduction and flood control projects in the state. So if I could just ask you, gentlemen, to quickly give me within 2 minutes what you see your major role is besides what I just said.
All right. Good evening. I'm with the New Jersey State Police. I'm in the North Region Unit under the Emergency Response Bureau. We are responsible for the northern 11 counties in the state. My main function is I'm a liaison between the state and state OEM and our county OEM partners. And through the county, we also work with the municipalities. We're a conduit between FEMA and federal assistance and the county and municipal jurisdictions. Day to day, I'm responsible for preparedness activities, planning, training, exercising. We also, under Response Bureau, we respond to major incidents, whether it be natural or a technological incident. And as under that response, I'm again a liaison between the state and the local agencies. We help with the incident command system. We help with resource management, situational awareness. After a disaster, if we do have a presidentially declared disaster, we work with FEMA as preliminary damage assessments. We assist them with their community relations teams, and we assist with the public assistance process. And then we're also involved with the volunteer agencies such as the community emergency response teams at the local level.
Okay, I'm Bill McDonald. PP stands for Police Plaza, One Police Plaza. As it was mentioned earlier, I'm a retired New Jersey State Trooper, 25 years, and in that time I spent 15 years or so in the Office of Emergency Management, responding to emergencies and working with Jim and doing all the things that he had mentioned. When I retired, I took a job with FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and right now I'm coordinating all of our outreach efforts with regards to mitigation, all of our efforts and successes and things on how we can improve. One of the major components we're out there speaking about now is the flood maps. FEMA has realized in the past that we haven't been so successful in our outreach program when it comes to maps, and we're trying to get out ahead of the curve now, whether it be 1.5, 2 years prior to the maps becoming effective, so that we can get input from the communities, from those that are impacted by the flood, so that if there is any new technology, new science, new resources out there to help us improve the maps, that's part of my job, as well as coordinating all of the external affairs, whether it be congressional, whether it be with the local officials, and developing partnerships with the local communities, county governments, state, and other federal agencies, so that we all start working on the same page, so that now we're not working in silos, trying to get everybody to work together, because we all want the same result. You know, as it was alluded to in the beginning, you know, we're not going to stop the flooding per se, but if there's ways that we can all work together to improve and reduce the risk, identify the risk and reduce it, I think that's what we're all here to do.
As the Emergency Management Coordinator for the County of Passaic, I'm responsible for the development, coordination, and activation of the county mutual aid and emergency management plans. Program administration development encompassing the 4 phases of emergency management: mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Pardon me for my voice. I'm fighting a bug right now. You'll hear me talk about the EOC, that's the Emergency Operations Center for Passaic County. When an emergency occurs, we activate this office, and it's open for 24 hours for the entire length of the event. The EOC will be staffed by representatives of the Passaic County Sheriff's Department, our County Road Department, our Health Department, our Emergency Medical Coordinator, our Fire Coordinator Liaison, our Public Utilities, PSE&G, and JCP&L. New Jersey State Office of Emergency Management, the Public Information Officer, which is one of our county freeholders, OEM support staff, and any additional agencies that are required depending upon the type of emergency we're involved in. I have been granted the authority to declare a state of New Jersey in the entire county, and if my judgment, the result of a natural or man-made disaster happens, conditions may present severe hazards to life and property. If I declare a state of emergency, it's a step process. We go through the State Office of Emergency Management, the New Jersey State Police, right up to the governor. My staff and I coordinate closely with our municipal coordinators and county officials, as well as maintaining a close liaison with all our support staff in all our municipal emergency management offices. During the recovery period, I work closely with Stadia, OEM, and FEMA as direct partners. My office also assists in fulfilling resources requests during emergencies. Some requests can be fulfilled at the county level. Others must go through the state. During an emergency, such operations is done through what's commonly called the state E-teams, which is direct computer link from here to the Regional Operations Center in West Trenton. These are just some of the basic roles which fall under my command at the Office of Emergency Management and as the OEM coordinator during a declared disaster. Thank you.
Roy Masaros with the Army Corps of Engineers, and I'm not here tonight to talk about specific projects, but try to help educate for hydrology and hydraulics, which is what my function is. I conduct hydrologic and hydraulic studies for the Army Corps for various projects. Some of the projects that we do actually get to construction. For example, the Greenbrook project. That project I could talk about because it's actually in construction. I wanted to comment on the keynote address's talk, which was excellent. He used the word swamp, and there's been a paradigm shift in recent decades. We now call them wetlands, and we've realized we've destroyed a vital part of our ecosystem, and those swamps that we now consider wetlands that are vital habitats are actually part of a floodplain. So it's tragic for a couple of reasons that we filled them in as swamps, and we didn't appreciate them as wetlands, and we also filled them in as part of the floodplain, which was problematic. So hopefully if you have questions related to H&H, hydrology and hydraulics, I'll attempt to answer those for you tonight. Thank you.
Dave Rosenblatt, the Administrator of the Office of Engineering and Construction with DEP. We have 2 units in our group. One is the Bureau of Coastal Engineering, which performs coastal storm damage reduction projects like beach replenishments, the construction of groins and bulkheads, et cetera. The other one that's more relevant tonight is the Bureau of Dam Safety and Flood Control. We don't have an active role during emergency situations. We are involved in the post-storm dam assessments to determine whether there's any damage to the dams after experiencing the heavy flows. We also, prior to storms, have alerted the dam operators and dam owners to conduct pre-storm inspections to make sure everything is secure at the dam site. Most of our biggest role is to work with the Army Corps of Engineers in the planning of flood control projects, of course, well in advance of any storms, but because of past storms. So that's what we do.
Thank you. Okay, the first question is, how has your agency office responded to flood emergencies in the past, and what would you see as some of your successes, failures, and challenges? Please, if you can, be specific with case studies. So, James, if you could start us off.
Sure. As the region rep, I staff the County Emergency Operations Center, and I'm a partner and liaison with the county. And through that, I help the county support the municipalities. I am the direct link between the County Emergency Operations Center and the State Emergency Operations Center down in Trenton. Resources that the municipalities or the county may not be able to fill, I make the request and try to manage the resources at a state level to assist municipalities. After or shortly after the flooding incident, we work with FEMA doing preliminary damage assessments and getting out in the community with the community relations teams. We staff the disaster recovery centers to assist FEMA, and we work with their public assistance process. Success would be our USAR, our Urban Search and Rescue Team. They have come out the last 2 major events, and they've performed numerous swiftwater rescues and assisted some municipalities in their waterborne and swiftwater rescue capabilities. The challenges would just be that for us, resource management is always a challenge because when things get busy down at the local level, we do our best to help the municipalities and the counties as much as we can. And just with the amount of incidents that we had in a short period of time has made it a challenge.
Okay. just to educate and inform people on FEMA, on how we respond to a disaster and emergency, specifically flooding. Just let me inform you first that FEMA is a support agency. A lot of times FEMA gets, the attention, where's FEMA, where's those Blue Jackets when there's a flooding event. But you must understand that in New Jersey, in a home rule state, every incident is a local incident. And then when the local government, the local entities exceed their authorities, their resources, their personnel, it then moves to the county, to the state, and then FEMA does not get involved in any emergency or disaster in the state of New Jersey until we are requested by the governor. Once we are requested by the governor, then we can come in and do what Jim alluded to as a joint preliminary damage assessment. So a lot of the damage has already occurred, has already been identified before we even get boots on the ground. So when we come in and put boots on the ground, we're coming in based on what the state has identified to us. We go out as partners. We try to go out and do those damage assessments with the state, with county officials, and with the local officials in the affected communities. Once we go out and assess that damage, we then compile that, bring that back to the regional office, and then the governor submits a request to the president requesting a federal declaration if it meets certain criteria and certain thresholds. We submit that then on behalf of the state to the President of the United States in the White House, and then they make a determination on whether or not there's going to be a declaration. If there is a declaration declared, then we will then come out again and support the state. If it's a public assistance disaster, we will come out with public assistance specialists and help identify the damage to the public entities, to the infrastructure, and then develop what they call the project worksheet to get you reimbursed for those damages. If there's an individual assistance declaration declared, which is damage to homes, we then have specialists come out and assist you in identifying the damage in the homes, and then how to assist you to coordinate with all of the insurance agencies that you'll be dealing with, and then assist you getting reimbursed from the individual assistance program. The third component is the mitigation. If there's any declaration declared in the state of New Jersey, whether it be in a specific county or not, the entire state is eligible for hazard mitigation. So when there is a disaster, then the state will request each of the municipalities, whether they're in the declared zone or not, to submit what is called a letter of intent, letter of interest, to see if they want to identify any hazard mitigation programs or projects to be submitted. Once they are submitted, they're reviewed at the state. The state prioritizes all of the projects submitted. They submit them to us at FEMA Region 2, and then we fund whichever projects the state has identified. Now, there is a dollar amount associated with that. Hazard mitigation is limited to 15% of the total disaster. So if there is, whatever the total disaster is at 30 days, at that point, 15% is set aside for hazard mitigation. So the larger the disaster, the larger the amount of mitigation monies that we can provide. Just specifically in this disaster, in Passaic County alone, I know that we have obligated, I think, $16.5 million just in mitigation monies, and that was, I think, for 114 properties, acquisition properties in Passaic County alone. We've obligated over $48 million statewide in this disaster, and I think we're right at our limit right now for that 15% statewide. So it's not an endless pot of money, but it is still a significant amount of money. But again, it sounds like a lot of money, but for that money to go statewide, we obviously can't fund every project, and that's why we rely on the state to prioritize those projects, and then we fund those that we can. Once the disaster is declared and they set up what is called a joint field office, then we go out and partner with the state, and that's where it was mentioned in my bio that I was the branch director. I was the branch director for Hurricane Irene, for the mitigation branch in the response to this disaster specifically. Some of the other successes that we've had, and when we've identified some of the severe repetitive loss properties, some of the properties that have been damaged numerous times throughout several disasters, I think it was about $40 million we've already obligated just for Passaic County over the last couple disasters for severe repetitive loss properties and I believe it was over 200 properties, and that was acquisitions and elevations. In the video, and the keynote speaker alluded to that, we can't remove all of the properties from the flood zone, but if there are other mitigation measures that we can take, maybe elevating them above the base flood elevation so that the risk is reduced, that's another option. And some of the floodplain management that we need to do, there is an ordinance. If a community participates in the National Flood Insurance Program, they have to adopt a local floodplain ordinance. And part of that floodplain ordinance, they must inspect and ensure that the building in the floodplain is in compliance with that ordinance. So if they want to continue to build in the floodplain, they have to identify the risk and build to a certain code and standard. That's why we're going through some of these projects where we have substantially damaged homes as a result of the last disaster. And once they're identified as substantially damaged, which is 50% or more, they have to be brought into compliance with the floodplain ordinance. So that's when it gets really expensive. So that's probably part of our successes, is that we've been able to provide a significant amount of money to Passaic County specifically. As I said, and for Hurricane Irene, it's over $16 million, and over the last several disasters, it's probably over $40 million. Some of the shortcomings, as I said, we realize that we need to do a better job of our outreach, of what we can do. You're welcome.
Thank you. At least you're honest.
Okay, we need to do a better job with our outreach, on getting out there to inform the communities on what we can offer, all right? But part of that outreach is also to get the communities and the individuals to take ownership in living in a special flood hazard area. They have to realize that there is a risk at living in those areas. And if they're not willing to participate in either an acquisition, elevation, or take other mitigation measures, the event is going to continue to occur. There is a cost
Bill, can
share.
I just cut you off a bit and hold some of those?
Sure, I
ideas?
could hold.
Okay. Let me get through everybody, because as I said, we're going to be stuck for time here. Bob Lyons?
Thank you. I've been the emergency management coordinator for the past 6 years, and my office has responded to 6 major disasters with federal declarations since 2007. During the event, we're responsible for the boots on the ground, giving them the direction where to go, where the severity of the flood, for example, just to talk about floods is, and how we respond and give them the aid that we can. We have supported our local emergency management departments by fulfilling resource requests. And information received from the state and national weather service is constantly passed on to our local OEM coordinators. Our status reports are on a regular basis from local OEMs, coordinating with the county and the state. Recently, we activated what is commonly called the COOP and COG plan for Passaic County. With the city of Patterson going underwater in a rapid degree, we had to move the county court system out, the first in the state of New Jersey where the county courts didn't close down. They actually relocated to Passaic County Technical Institute in Wayne, and we ran our offices from there. We all face challenges on a daily basis, but without planning and exercising, dealing with the many disasters, we have continued to learn. Our capabilities have grown and gotten better over the last 6 years. Increased planning, the county has joined together with every one of our municipal authorities, all 16, in a multiple hazard mitigation plan. That's an all-encompassing plan. You'll find that on the county website for those of you who are interested. Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee, if it weren't for the preparedness meetings we've conducted and information we shared, we've been worse off than we were. Resources were staged and emergency personnel were put on standby activation. As Trooper Dunham said, this is the second time we requested the New Jersey State USART team, and thanks to Dr. Rose at Passaic County Community College, I was able to take over the Wayne Building and turn it into a staging area for some 40 state troopers with emergency response boats. And thanks here to Dr. Waldron, the rec center was allowed for us the first time as a backup emergency shelter if necessary. Challenges, we've encountered a bit. Failures, everybody makes mistakes, but we're learning and we're trying to do a better job. Not having limited resources in the pecking order of state budgets and county budgets is a problem for emergency management at the county and local levels. Thank you.
Roy?
The Army Corps won't immediately respond to flooding incidences unless we're called on by FEMA to get involved. That's when we would get involved with what happened in your communities in the past year, in the fall of last year. When we have Congress look at issues because local communities elevate that to Washington, we get funding for studies, and that moves it to the Army Corps. We conduct a study. You're not here for that tonight, I don't think. You're looking at response and planning and things of that sort. What we do at the Army Corps is projects that we've built, and there again, it doesn't directly help you tonight. If we have a project like a levee flood wall that's been built, we have to go out and assess that after a storm to see whether or not that was damaged. But what that is related to projects that have been built already. So as I said, that's not a direct benefit to your community, that unless the Army Corps has built a project in your community already, we wouldn't get involved with looking at that post-disaster evaluations and things of that sort. The complexity of, or difficulties, challenges of what the Army Corps is involved with is because it's multi-agency, it's local, it's state, and it's federal government. It becomes very complicated to get funding, to get cooperation agreements, and to find those projects that, through triage, are the most important ones to proceed with. Usually it's communities that are damaged the most that get the attention of Congress and then hence the U.S. Army Corps. So that process is a little bit involved, and it doesn't help you for immediate planning. And I think I'll leave it there for now. I have other thoughts, but I want to make it relevant to what that question was that was asked.
I just want to jump back to my opening statement and add a couple things. My office is also responsible for maintaining floodplain maps in the state of New Jersey. We are currently working with FEMA on updating those maps. Some of those maps are 30-plus years old, and certainly the updates are very much needed. We also work with FEMA on a grant to provide assistance to the local floodplain administrators to make sure the National Flood Insurance Program ordinances are in place and are being followed by each municipality. So really, the floodplain mapping leads me to this larger scale, what I'll call a success, and that is the governor's 15-point plan for addressing or mitigating some of the problems in the Passaic Basin. Certainly, we're not finished. We just started most of these things, most of these items. I don't want to go into detail about the buyouts that we're doing with FEMA funding and with matches from Green Acres. We're also involved with structural elevations in the Passaic Basin. We work with the Army Corps of Engineers on the acquisition of open space to be used as flood storage areas. We have given out money to 4 municipalities so far for de-snagging and shoal dredging at the municipality's request to alleviate some minor flooding issues in very localized areas. Again, at local request, as part of the governor's 15-point plan, we're looking at the removal of the feeder dams on the Pompton River. And we have been working with our land use regulation program to expedite the permit process for any tree removal from the floodway. I think it's important, and this gets to some of our emergency involvement, although not directly. I think the fact that we're working with the United States Geological Survey to install more stream gauges and to improve with computerization some of the existing stream gauges will go a long way to enhance the National Weather Service's ability to predict what flooding will occur. We are also working with USGS to produce inundation mapping in the Passaic Basin that will enable the OEM coordinators to know, based on a certain amount of rain, just how much flooding and where the flooding will occur. We are working with the Army Corps of Engineers on a reevaluation of their previous studies to bring them up to date and to provide a more current direction as to what paths the department and the Corps of Engineers may take regarding heavy-duty construction projects that so many people are interested in, the levees and et cetera. Those are the, what I would consider the initial successes that we are involved in right now.
Okay, thank you. My second question. To some extent, the root causes of flood risks, such as increasing amounts of impervious surfaces, involve human actions over which municipalities and state might exercise some control. Do you envision government responding to flood threats by supporting preventive measures or by enacting new regulations? So I'll throw that out to James.
All right, well, currently, another unit within the state police under state OEM is our mitigation unit, and they do a great job. They have an outstanding partnership with FEMA Region 2. Currently, they're coordinating over 70 mitigation projects, well over $100 million, and 80% of those projects are in the Passaic River Basin. Most of the projects are property acquisition, but other projects do include the flood control and elevation. They do a wonderful job on a day-to-day basis, coordinating with FEMA. It's an outstanding partnership, and they constantly are working as a conduit with the grant, the mitigation money to keep these projects going and keep the mitigation efforts moving forward.
Thank you. Bill?
Your question directly, we really don't have involvement in, what the state or the locals do with regards to their, building and in the flood hazard area, other than them complying with the ordinance, which is coordinated again through Dave's office. I just would like to go back to, again, some of the other successes. I'm going to take some of the Army Corps' time since they didn't use it all last time. Dave's being very humble here with some of the successes, and he mentioned his Green Acres, Blue Acres projects and programs. One major success story out of this disaster was that the governor supported the acquisitions and the early acquisitions of homes in this disaster. Normally, a hazard mitigation project, especially an acquisition, takes 18 months to 2 years from the disaster. The governor requested and insisted on an expedited program for this disaster. Within 90 days, we obligated the money for, I believe it was $20 million worth of acquisitions within 90 days. We would not have been able to do that at the federal government if we didn't have the support from the governor, from the Department of Environmental Protection, and obviously from the State Office of Emergency Management. So that was a success story in and of itself. The other success story on the state's level is the partnership that we've all worked so closely together. In the Joint Field Office, we've worked very closely with the State Office of Emergency Management. DEP was housed directly with us. They're Green Acres and Blue Acres people. And what the people really need to understand is that our grants are 75% federal, 25% non-federal share. So when there is an acquisition or an elevation to a home, FEMA or the federal government will provide 75% of the cost. The 25% non-federal share is generally incurred by the homeowner or the applicant. Blue Acres, Green Acres program through the Department of Environmental Protection and at the governor's direction are funding that 25% for a lot of the residents so that there is no cost there. We're trying to make the residents as whole as possible with these programs. So that is a success story that I think Dave is being a little humble about, that I think they should be applauded for in the state of New Jersey for all of their efforts and how aggressive and supportive they've been to the victims of the storms themselves.
Thank you. Robert?
The question deals with the local and state level, doesn't fall under my control by my office, but I got to answer as an individual, yes, the public has got the pressure point going. People are paying attention. Quite frankly, in the 6 years that I've been the OEM coordinator, everybody is finally pulling together. And without the public pressure, I don't know if there's going to be change. I believe our state legislature is doing their best, and so is the federal government. Is it enough? Ask the people.
Thank you. Roy?
I think our keynote speaker did an excellent job to frame out hydrology, to frame out the Passaic River Basin and why these things happen. This idea of an impervious surface is one of the root problems that we have for flooding. When I think about, and some of this is going to be my opinion, but when I think about what's happening in these communities, do we need new policies? No. Do we need enforcement of existing policies? Maybe. That's not the Army Corps' position, but that's my position based on what I know, what I've seen. When we look at development in the floodplain, and is it continuing? My answer to that is yes. Is it a problem? Yes. We're causing more impervious surfaces, and it makes the flood conditions worsen over time because we're increasing impervious surfaces and not allowing the floodplain to do what naturally it was supposed to do. Later, we're going to get to some of the questions where I could do some other background, so I'll leave those thoughts for then.
It's all right.
But the question was, should we have new policies? I don't know we should go around to create new policies, local policies. I'm wondering whether or not if we enforce the ones we have now would work. We heard talk about FEMA and the floodplain management that we have, and if we follow those programs to the letter, we'd be better off than where we are today. But I just think, and again, this is my opinion, not the Army Corps position, that we look at these communities and we look at land use, land development, and because it becomes rateable, go ahead and do that development. Are they supposed to be using NJDEP best management practices for stormwater? Yes. But is that followed up with inspections? I don't know the answer to that question. Is it really enforced the way these things are supposed to be built for stormwater runoff, stormwater control? They're probably built that way, but are they maintained? And the infrastructure and the cost to maintain all that becomes a problem over time. So the question was, do we need new policies? I don't know, so much as enforcing the policies that are already there and really scrutinizing carefully what we're doing with our floodplain land use in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Roy. David?
Yeah, I agree with my associates from the Corps about regulations and enforcing existing regulations. I think that I think so much rests with municipalities, and I'm not saying that because I'm with the state. I would say that if I was a municipality. That's where everything happens initially. And I think municipalities, particularly upstream municipalities that are fortunate enough to be on slopes or high ground, need to get creative in the way they handle stormwater. I think everybody here knows that. It's not fair to make the stormwater disappear and have it wind up on the downstream communities. Everybody's downstream, exactly, and particularly in this area where you're downstream of some very slopey areas. Somehow we really have to convince the upstream communities that they have a significant role to play here. I think they know that. I think sometimes they don't know how to go about retrofitting existing development. Maybe some places are not careful enough about the development that they do allow to occur. Maybe not mindful enough about just what this stormwater means. Am I wrong?
No, I agree.
Okay.
Couldn't have said any better.
I think even in the downstream flooded communities, I think with municipal turnover at all levels, council, mayor, floodplain administrators, I think it's incumbent upon the state, FEMA, OEM, working together to make sure that as new people come in, that they are fully aware of their responsibilities and their potential for being part of the solution. And it seems to be that there is not a continuum all the time that is necessary. If we enter another 20-year dry period, the focus could go away on flooding. Even that little respite that we had where we entered a drought period. People were like, oh boy, thank God it didn't rain in March again. And I know people's attention turns to other things, like water supply. And I think we really just have to stay on course. I know at the state level, the 15-point plan is constantly, we're constantly updating everybody above us as to its status, but it's so much more than that. I think that we just can't let things slide because we haven't had a rainfall in 3 weeks. And I think that's just a natural tendency to move on to the next crisis because there are so many crises out there. But now looking at the crowd, I know that there are so many people that are never going to forget the effects of the floods, and you'll be all over us and your municipalities too. So maybe we won't run into that problem here, but I caution that we be wary of that.
Thank you. For this region, climate change is predicted to result in an increase in precipitation and possible parallel increase in extreme events such as Hurricane Irene. Has your agency office factored in climate change when planning future flood response? James.
Again, I'm in the response unit, so this is a little off of what my unit does. I know our mitigation unit, when they plan, they can only use the past disasters as a benchmark. A little off the flood subject, for the preparedness side, we like to use all hazards planning. So we plan for everything and anything that we can, whether it be a man-made, technical disaster or a natural disaster. We try to plan for sheltering in place, evacuations, resource management, regardless of what the disaster is or what caused that disaster. So we try to be ready and able to respond to whatever is placed before us.
Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, in FEMA, they are considering and reviewing climate change, but me specifically in mitigation and what my background is and who I'm working for right now, we just work on past disasters. All of our products, all of our deliverables are based on what has happened in the past, what the risk has already been identified, and how we can reduce that risk. So climate change would be someone else to address.
But are you aware, the people who direct you, do you think
They are aware, but it's very hard, especially when it comes to specifically the special flood hazard area and identifying the risk, to anticipate what that risk is going to be. We can only go based on the probability and the experience that we've already occurred.
Thank you. Bob?
Climate change is all part of the all hazards plan. We're right now moving from the state and county system into the federal system, and it's called ESF, Emergency Support Function. It utilizes 15 annexes, as well as a basic plan for our response. It includes transportation, communications, public works, engineering, firefighting, mass care, resource support, health and medical, search and rescue, hazardous materials, agriculture, and natural resources, long-term community recovery, and external affairs. Again, this is the type of planning that we're doing at the emergency management level, and it rests upon us doing more drills, tabletops, and practical exercises.
Thanks. Roy?
One of the strengths of the U.S. Army Corps are the great minds of the engineers that we have doing studies and do analyses. Planning is a different program. I'm not as familiar with it, but I am familiar with the individuals that are responsible for looking at climate change. I'm going to say this is my opinion. Climate change is real. If we look at what happened for Floyd in 1999 to Irene in 2011, at least for the Raritan River in Bound Brook, that's where Army Corps is currently constructing a project, we had 2 500-plus-year events on the Raritan River within 12 years. That's a little scary to me. So when we talk about climate change, I'm going to tell you it's real, and we should take it seriously. The Army Corps now have guidance for looking at coastal studies, and we have predictive tools to say what we should do for storm surge when we're designing projects. That's not of concern for the people in this audience tonight, but I want you to know at the Army Corps, when we look at coastal studies, coastal projects, we are factoring in sea level rise. What we can do for studies that the Army Corps does for hydrology, that's the rainfall runoff, is we can update our hydraulic models based on current events. So if we look at a study that was done 20 years ago when we were developing the project for Bound Brook, New Jersey, what we do now is to revise the hydrology based on the past decade of rainfall. So we are addressing this for studies that we're doing right now, and we are looking at what we do for the coastal projects versus riverine projects, which is what you folks would be most concerned with. And I just want to say again that this idea of climate change should not be taken lightly, and it should not be misunderstood that if it is real, it's going to be potential problems in the future. And it's a great thought to think that in the next 20 years might not be a wet period, but I'm just afraid that's not going to be the case, and I'm afraid that your communities are going to continue to have problems. This isn't based on scientific fact per se, but a lot of studies have been conducted that look at this idea of climate change and progression of what's happening with our environment. And I think that we shouldn't take it lightly when we say climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
I think I explained that when we do flood control projects, we always do them with the Corps of Engineers. So if they are incorporating climate change into their modeling efforts, then we are very happy for that. We do know that the design of the coastal storm damage reduction projects like beaches and groins and levees are already in their design and taking into consideration what may occur as far as sea level rise. But inland, I don't think we're there yet. Correct?
We don't have predictive tools the way we do for coastal projects to model sea level rise because it's a very gradual, measurable event. It's debatable by some, yes. But for rainfall, we don't have models that can tell us things that are going to progress in some trend per se. We don't have predictive tools because we're not looking at global climate and seeing what's happening to ice melt off at the polar caps, et cetera. So it's a little bit trickier with riverine studies and more problematic.
Thank you. Okay. Next question. Watersheds don't necessarily correspond to political boundaries, and it may not be possible to limit the causes or enact a response that is limited to one political unit. What do you envision to be the challenges posed by local and regional planning and response to flooding?
All right, again, I'm going to go off just a little bit, but our mitigation unit is working on the state hazard mitigation plan, and they are going to attempt to bridge the gap between watershed boundaries and political boundaries. As far as regional planning, my unit is involved with regional catastrophic planning for northern New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. We're involved with the Urban Area Security Initiative planning, which is pretty much northern New Jersey. All this is based on a regional level. We support the county's emergency operations plan, which again is beyond just a local municipality. It's based on a response throughout the county, and we're responsible for the state emergency operations plan, which gives us a statewide perspective and a statewide plan to respond. For my unit, the beauty of having a state rep with as a liaison in the county emergency operations center during a disaster is the fact that there is a direct link between the county and the state. So at a state level, I can attempt to assist them, in any way that they need.
Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, we've identified the fact that we need to do our planning and assessments and our mapping on a watershed basis. Specifically in New Jersey, when it comes to jurisdictional boundaries, we have developed maps and firms and panels where we show the flood hazard area and then it stops at a jurisdictional boundary. Well, we all know that flood hazard area doesn't stop at any jurisdictional boundary. It continues on. So we're trying to develop the maps, the studies, and all of our planning in a regional, in a watershed type concept. So anything in the future that we're doing is going to be based on a watershed basis.
Thank you. Bob?
We work with the towns that are around the watershed areas, the municipalities and plan. They work with the exercise, the diviets, and quite frankly, they make it less of a challenge, but more of an effective emergency tool. They're more aware of the pressures put on them, and it really is a state issue. I mean, I have no control over what happens in that area.
Okay, thank you. Roy?
Some of our problems that we have when developing solutions and projects and things of that sort, it's multi-agency, it's local, state, and then federal. And it's very hard, the more players you have, to find consensus and agreement to do things and to get things accomplished. The way the Army Corps operates is if you have issues that are elevated high enough into Congress, you get funding for it, and that's the way things would progress. As far as what this question is asking, we need to integrate things in terms of watershed management, the way my colleague described. That becomes critical in order to effectively deal with issues going forward in the future, especially with the backdrop of what I said before, which was my opinion. I'll mention that again. If we do have increased rainfall and runoff, that these kinds of coordinations are going to be critical to do. The Army Corps can be responsible for some things, but as I said, there's like this triage or pecking order before you get to the Army Corps, and Army Corps gets funding to do a study. Studies take a long time, as some of you may know in this room, and then eventually you might get to a project. The case study I could tell you for success of a project that went through all that process is the Greenbrook, what we used to call the Greenbrook Flood Control Project. Well, we got in trouble for calling anything a flood control because the public should know we can never control a flood. That is what the project was called, but we now say flood, the Army Corps calls it flood risk management, because the best we could ever hope for is to manage our risk of flooding. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
I think that I think that regional planning is, or the need for regional planning is obvious at this point. I think municipalities are finding out that they can be much more effective if they work together to get some of the things they want. Now they just have to learn to work together to do certain things. There is now, I believe, a very good understanding of how upstream communities can affect downstream communities. And I think you've heard the Army Corps and DEP talk about how, you know, future flood control projects, no matter what they are, have to be mindful of the downstream communities, that we're just not going to put a levee here or a levee there or a wall there, flood wall, you know, without considering the ramifications downstream. That leads to regional planning. And we very rarely will meet with municipalities on an individual basis. We need to meet with municipalities together that are experiencing the same problem in the same area. I also think that as municipalities start to reach out on their own to take action, because yes, DEP and the Corps can be slow sometimes in their very detailed planning of their major projects, communities will want to do things on their own, but they won't have the resources. And I think that by pooling resources and technical expertise, there will be de facto regional planning and maybe even some minor construction buyouts or whatever can be done on a regional basis to effectuate change from what exists now.
Thank you, gentlemen, I didn't even think I'd get to my fifth question, so I didn't even practice reading it. But I'm actually going to get there. As noted in the January 2011 report by the governor, by the Commission on Passaic River Flooding, the risk to flooding in the basin has probably increased rather than decreased in recent decades. Do you believe that the current change in emphasis on certain mitigation strategies will be sufficient to address this increased risk, or alternatively, would you suggest additional steps be taken? James.
There's the 15-point strategy is very comprehensive. I won't steal anything from DEP here. For our unit, our portion of the plan, we conducted emergency operation plan reviews to make sure we could fill any gaps that might have appeared during the recent incidents. We worked to enhance communications between the counties, municipalities. We worked with the county to work with the municipalities. We brought in the public information from state OEM to work with the municipalities on enhancing their public information capabilities, and mainly working with the municipalities on their local plans to make sure they were enhanced enough to respond effectively to a flooding event.
Thank you. Bill?
As far as the governor's plan, that's a state plan, and it's something that I'm sure Dave will speak more intelligently on. I know that anytime they do have meetings or any type of planning activities going on in the Passaic River Basin, we do have mitigation engineers and planners present and participating in those meetings going forward.
Okay. Bob?
Real quick, I defer to Jim.
Okay.
I'm not really familiar with what that entails, and I didn't read it, so I don't want to comment on it. But I do want to comment, so this is a very quick question, actually. I do want to comment about the statement of risk of flooding in the basin. You've already heard me talk about that, and I just want to leave my piece here and say that I think there is increased risk, and that should be taken seriously. And I hope that we have 20 years of a dry spell, but I just don't think that's the case. So while I still have my platform here, I just want to emphasize this idea of hydrology, hydraulics, runoff, rainfall, and what we're doing to our watershed and how that hampers where you live today and what it's going to create for problems in the future. And that's a concern of mine. I'm not saying that how the Army Corps is addressing that, but the state has taken a position on what is referred to in question 5. I just am trying to comment on this idea of increased risk of flooding, and I want to acknowledge that and agree with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. David?
I see Assemblyman Romana in the room. I see Mayor DeFrancisi, ex-Mayor DeFrancisi from Little Falls. Let me answer this question this way. When the Governor's Flood Advisory Commission was meeting, one of the meetings we devoted to a presentation by a Dr. Jerry Galloway of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Roy, do you know? Okay. He was I think he was stationed in the Midwest, and he's now an internationally recognized consultant who presented both the way the Army Corps of Engineers looked at flooding in the past and the way that the Army Corps of Engineers and the states will be looking at it in the future. And who said control versus, was that you, Roy? Versus risk management. Dr. Galloway was all about risk management, and even though he was a hardcore construction engineer for most of his life, and he's old, he's older than me. He has had a change in his thought process here, and he'd like to see, I believe, the states and the federal government going that way, just because it is so difficult to control flooding, and it's easier to control risk. If there was no one in the floodplain, floods would not present a risk. Because we've built there is risk. And he sees, because of just how hard it is to get funding for flood control projects on a continual basis where they're needed, and they're needed all over the country if that's the way you want to proceed with flood control. He thinks it's easier to go and remove the risk by moving people out of the floodplain, or moving them back, or moving them up. That is the direction that we'll probably have to take as a government, both federal and state, because there aren't enough resources to build new public works projects and maintain the existing public works projects we have, such as roads and bridges and et cetera. So if I can make one point here, that is that I think we need to get a different mindset about, I agree with Dr. Galloway, we need a different mindset about how we're going to do this. Soft projects, buyouts, elevations. That's the way we need to go generally.
Thank you. We're going to have a short break.
Thank you, Dick, and thank you all of our panelists for bringing your expertise to us. We really appreciate it.